Hello, y'all. Hope you're having a really great day. We're going to sit down at the table again today, and I've already put out a few tutorials. So this is something that I just started. I drew out this pretty picture that I want to use the segments of this drawing and this painting that I am going to end up with. There'll be tutorials on different parts of the painting as I do it, which is the thing I love to do, and encouragement in here and teaching in here and techniques and things, very beginner friendly to help you to understand this medium that we're using. So let's just dive right in. Okay, so as you can see, we're back at the table here, and this is the picture that I showed you a second ago. Now, I already did a few of these things with a couple of lessons involved with this first beginner part here that I was doing. Today, what I want to show you is how we're going to use, that's not the brush I'm going to use, I want a different brush. How we're going to use one of these brushes. This will be the flat one. And in the back, with these windows, this is a picture with, it's like we're looking through a window. We've got a table down here with some apples in a bowl and a vase and some other things. And although I didn't draw everything out yet, I wanted to wait and kind of do it step by step. So in the back, as though we're looking through the window, in the background here are going to be trees and foliage, some sky. So the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to wet right, a little ways down here. I've got a flat brush that I'm working with here. And I want to put quite a bit of water on this part because this is going to be a faded sky. Oh, I'm also working on, this is, unfortunately I tore this out of the block that I made. I actually have this watercolor pad I made into a block with Mod Podge, and I just went around the side of the block and leaving one little place open so I can stick something in there and get the paper off. But I tore this off for something else, and so now I'm afraid it's gonna buckle a little bit because I don't want to tape it down. I don't want the tape to get in the way. So what I'm going to do here, oops, I forgot to take the cover off my paints. I guess I better get with it today, huh? Okay, so this is just covering my paints with this plastic cover so that they don't dry up in between everything. So I've got all this stuff on my palette here, all my paints on my palette. And I have also some, along with my watercolors, I have a few, what do you call them? Acrylic colors that I use in my watercolor, a lot of these videos as well, and paintings. So I'm going to go into the blue, put it on my palette. I want a very faint color back here, very light, so you can see how light that is. I'm going to kind of squiggle it around on both sides because I want an indication of clouds as well. So we're just going to kind of maneuver it around here in the wet, and I want it faint because it's kind of, way off in the background is what this is sort of depicting, that that we're looking, far off, and we're seeing some sky and some clouds far off. So I put that in there with a very wet wash. So that's wetting the paper first quite a lot, and then taking a light wash, which is the paint on the palette with a lot of water in it. Now I'm going to add a little bit more up at the top here areas, because the top area of the sky would be a little darker. This is all going to dry a whole lot lighter, even so. So we're putting this in like this for that sky that's way off in the background there. Um, and also, what I'm going to be doing, I'm going to, for at the moment here, I'm going to change that brush to, well, I'm going to use a round, let's see, what am I going to use? I was using this flat brush for that. And then what I also want to do is I want to come down here a little further, actually. These are like really tall windows. Those really long kind of windows. And I'm going to get a round brush, round type brush, a fairly large round type brush. And I'm going to go into my green. I'm going to put some on my palette with some water. And I'm going to add a little yellow into that because I want to just squiggle my brush around to indicate that in the background there, somewhere way out in the back where we're looking, I had a little too much pigment on that, but that's okay, it's in the corner, so that'll work. And I can pull it out, bring it over here by wetting my brush, going into that already painted like trees. Because what we're going to see here is we're going to see a faint notion that there are trees back there, right? And they're in front of the sky. The sky was first, and then we put the notion of trees. This will dry lighter than what you see, but on that one side over here, I want to put a little darker. I'm going very careful around my, oops, I just went, that's okay. What we'll do is we'll get water on here, pull this out, so it's going to have a different color anyway, so we'll just, and because this is all watery, it's all kind of mixing together. What I'm doing is just causing some shadows. I'm going to go into some of my orange. I'm going to add the orange in there. Wash off my brush first, dry it off a little. I'm going to just put some orange into places. Indication of some colored trees out there somewhere. Just wiggling my brush around in the water is all I'm doing. So that when this dries, which we'd have to have it dry in order to do anything else on top of it, so that when this dries, it'll look like faint trees way out in the background. We're going to go right in between the areas of the vase with this lovely, and the apples, with this lovely big pointed brush here. So let's see, what other color? I guess we can add a little more green into here, different places. So as it dries, it's gonna look a little different. Get the greens going on. So you see, and then what I'm gonna do in this video as well, I started in a different video, the panes of the window. So we're gonna do that again. I'm gonna use this smaller flat brush, and we're going to go into some burnt sienna. We got some blue on the palette, we'll add that. We're going to have some yellow ochre, maybe a little touch of red, all on my brush. And I'm going to come down. I went up higher on that other side by mistake because I didn't want to do that, but that's okay. We're practicing here, so it's. And what I'm doing is using the side of my brush. I can do it that way, or I can dab like this, kind of dab it in. The glare on this paper from the light. I hope you're not having that same problem. I don't want to move everything at this point. But I'm coming down here. At this point, I'm on dry paper and kind of wet paint. Now I just dabbed into the yellow ochre. Right now I'm using the end and then the flat part of the brush. And right now I'm just going up and down like this because, you know, wood has a wood grain to it. So I want it to sort of kind of look like wood grain as I'm a little more blue here. To give it a little bit of that look. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to come over here. I don't want to set my hand into the paints. Do the same thing on this one. I forgot to put a little bit of blue in there to give that appearance into the wood on my last video. So that's doing that side. And then the next, I can't go onto this one in the middle right now because this is still pretty wet. And what will happen is if I try to do a line, being the line of wood across with this wet, it'll spread all over. Well, we don't want that because we would never make out that it was the window pane. It would just spread into the color. So what I'm going to do is come down here, wet this a little too much water there. Wet this part down here that is the bottom window part of the pane. Take those same colors. This time I wet it, but I don't want it very, very wet. I only want it a little tiny bit. I'm going to put some blues, some reds, but I don't want it super dark. I just, see, I'm very carefully going back and forth with this chisel part is called the end of my brush. These work good around things like this. Get these colors in here for this part of the window pane. It's working well. See how well that worked? We're already starting to resemble a window with foliage out the back. It's no lines for branches or anything like that because it's so far back. Once it dries, it will get real light. The idea that it's so far back, you can't really make much of anything out. And that'll give what's called depth to the painting. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to do section by section with you guys. Get a little sepia into this for a little bit darker. Because this would be rather shadowed under here. Darker. Maybe not there, but we'll lighten that up in a minute. So, okay, and then I'm going to just with the end of my brush there, with a dry brush, I'm taking out the paint in the water, washing it off, coming onto my paper towel, drying it off, and come over here and pick up some paint for some highlights, putting it back in a few places, because some of the light would be shining in and some of it would be a little lighter. I'm going to come in and do the same thing over here, wash it off, dry off my brush, get some spots that will look like the sun is shining when it does, and it lightens up the area where it is. This is dry now, so it's going to be a little harder for me to do, but that's all right, we can do it. So that worked on that. In the last one when I did the apples, I explained how, to try to leave the highlights, which is the white of the paper, and went over that with you. I went over the blending of some colors, of these colors, and so forth. So now that I don't think it's quite dry enough yet, there are ways, and I didn't think of it when I sat down, that you can dry this faster. You can use a hair dryer and dry it a lot faster. But I think it's dry enough at the moment, I think. I'm going to test it here in a second. I don't want too much paint on my brush. I want very little paint on my water, on my brush. And I'm going to turn the paper. Sometimes that works better. Now let's see here. I don't want to put my hand in the paint, so Yeah, we can do it now. Okay, so we're gonna make this using that very tip of my end of my brush. I don't know whether you'd call it tip end or, and we're gonna put in this middle pane here. With a bit of darker at the bottom so that it's, because at the bottom it would be darker. It's at the bottom, so it would be darker. So I want to just take a little bit off there, wipe some of that off, just go back over like this, and I can wipe some of that bottom line, that bottom area, and without very much water. Sorry if my hand was in the way there. Still too much water. We don't want it to mix all in with the trees, because we're making something different here. We're making the panes of the glass of the window, so that's a separate entity. It's not part of the background. Okay, so we'll add a little of that. We want to add a little orange. Actually, that's Indian yellow. Oh, I love that color. So I'm just adding that in there, and it's spread a little because it's wet, and that's what happens when it's wet. So now it's starting to look like a window, isn't it? So I think, let's see what we'll do next here. Oh, I wanted to add some of the blue. That makes a nice color when it gets in there with the other paints, you know, for window panes, windows. Can't think of the word I'm trying to say. And some more blue in there. And some little more darker at the bottoms of them than they would be at the top. Using just that nice edge of this flat brush with hardly any water and not a whole lot of paint. And also diluted paint. So as you can see, it's amazing how things start to come together once you put them together. You know, you add each object. So a lot of what this particular teaching is how we work with the brush and the water and the paint. What happens when you put a lot of water? What happens when you don't put as much water? And so forth and so on. This bowl here, I wanted it to be one of those glass bowls that have a pretty color, but you can see through it. So I actually, even though it's dry, I wanted to see if I could take a little more color out, a little bit even lighter than it is. I don't want to mess with it too much because I do not want to mess it up. It came out nicely. Now, I did not finish one of these apples on purpose. So we had one apple left in the bowl, and these are all dry now. All these apples are dry. So whatever I put in here is not going to spread to these other apples. So I'm going to get some red on my brush, very little water on my brush, very little water in my paint, and add this particular apple. Maybe even put a little more darker red in some areas where it would be like on the bottom, which would be shadow areas. You see? And I'm not going to do anything else but that with that one right there. I'm just going to leave it just like that. There was one area. No, I'm sorry. Leave it just like that. Yeah, we're just going to leave it. And that's the bowl of apples. Now, I had this area. I'm going to switch to a flat brush now again. Some people can do small areas with big brushes. Some people can't. They got to use small brushes. Some people just prefer large over small in small areas and large for large areas. It's all in your preference. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to wet, most of that's all dry. And I'm going to come down here to what I have that is indicating a table. And I'm going to go around my other bowl, around the bowl of apples, and wetting this like this. And then I'm going to take, I'm not sure how this is going to work, but I'm going to take some blue and some yellow ochre, a little orange. I'm just not sure the color I want. There we go. And I'm just going to put this all on this wet. This is called a wash. And I'm going to get a little of this vermilion color, add that in there. Pull some out, but bring some over to there. Go back into that, I don't know really what it's called, but go back into this other color. And very carefully, and as you can see, because these other objects that I'm painting around are dry, I'm not going to have a problem with the paint spreading into there because that's dry. I want these colors to kind of mix like they're doing. Like this. And I just wiggle it around. This left side is the indication of the shade, so I'm going to take my brush and I'm going to pull quite a lot of this color out on the right hand side like this, because I want that to be a lot lighter right there, indicating in that area and some of this area here that the sun is shining on there, if you can see that. So I'm going to go back into my other color here, go around this and come back to this side, adding some of that red, burnt sienna. I've got a bunch of different colors mixed on my palette here. And that's another thing I wanted to say. Something that has come about quite nicely for me is that, and I've explained it before, is that I don't specifically mix a bunch of colors. I let colors mix on my palette, and then I use whatever kind of things I see. Like I've got some browns and reds and all kinds of other things that have mixed up on my palette here, and I'm using them to make this color for this table. Now there's going to be shadow here, so I'm going to put some Payne's Gray into that mix, and I'm going to cause that to have that shadow. Underneath here, we're going to put it in because it would have shadow. This would have a shadow because this is the shadow side. So we've got that like that. We've indicated that this is some light happening here. Now I think what I'm going to try, I'm going to take my brush, wet it, take the paint out, and I want to try to pull a little of this out to make this a little lighter. A little more like the sun is definitely hitting it more over here on this side. I thought it would dry a little lighter than it did, so I want to just take some of that out, remove it, which is taking the color off in the water, wiping off my brush, and if it's not too dry, because once it's dry it's nearly impossible. You can do it, but so that's a little bit lighter than this side, as you can see. The next video part of this that I'm going to do will be some curtains, but that's once this is all dried. Now I used my metallic blue on this, and I want to come back in and add some more pigment of the color, not very watered down. There's water in it because I got to take some of that out actually, because I watered my paints before I started. But see how this nice, very small brush is doing a nice job at going around with quite Well, I'm controlling it, but it's doing a really nice job anyways. And I want to put a little more darker. I'm doing a little bit of this Payne's Gray mix that I have in there. And leaving this other side nice and light, like you see. I'm going to take some of that Payne's Gray again, come down here underneath these objects, and paint in what would be shadow. Okay? Now, here's another thing. In some of my videos, I've shown you how the dark against the light makes the the lighter things stand out, right? If I wanted to just leave that white, I could, like it was a white bowl. But I have darker paint now around this white object, even if I just, color it with, paint it with a pink or some faint color. To make this stand out, I need the dark, and you can see how that's working. It's the light against the dark. Okay, so we did a few lessons in here. I'm coming in here and softening with just a watery brush, very little water. And so we don't have what's called hard lines, I'm just going over that again. And there'll be a bit of a sparkle because it is metallic paint. So I thought that'd be kind of cool. And over here is the light. I'm really not sure what I'm going to do with that bowl yet. That's why I'm not doing anything with it at this very moment. And for the fact that I want to keep these videos very short for these teachings, we're going to call this particular part of this video tutorial done for today. So I hope you've got some help from that, some tips. Do whatever you have to do. Zoom in, all that, rewind, whatever, to see some of the places and the things. Oh, wait a minute, there's one other little thing I want to do with you. I'm going to take a very small brush with some sepia and show you how, because the apples need a little stem. I forgot to put them in the last time. So with this little pointed brush here, we put in some stems, and I'm darkening inside the bowl where they're sitting right there, making that a little darker. And a little spot right here is the bowl. And there we go. We just needed to have the little tiny brushes like this with a beautiful tip like this do that kind of work. This will too, but you can't have hardly any water on it, because the moment that water comes down and mixes, it's going to spread. And right there, I wanted a very, what do you call it? Precise. I'm actually going to take some of this red. I just like something that I'm seeing that kind of happened with some water. I'm going to take some of this red and I like that effect right there. It's sort of just work it out into these trees, into the area. That's pretty. Okay, I'm leaving that like that. So check it out, folks. Check out my other tutorials. Always remember to wash and dry your brushes off. Check out the other tutorials for help as well. Tips and information and encouragement and all that. And I'll see you in the next video. And bye for now.